OU and OSU are still perfect on the season going into Big 12 play. The Sooners are number 1 and OSU is 21. Now it's time to get serious. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Bedlam Nation Conversation presented by Dodge. I'm Deputy Sports Editor Mike Koehler, and with me as always are OU beat writer Jake Trotter and OSU beat writer Scott Wright. First segment goes to Jake. You had the number 1 ranked Sooners. Oklahoma moved up because of all the upsets last week. But Jake, the question is, just like USC, just like Georgia, does OU have a trap game waiting for it potentially on the schedule?
Trap game, I don't know, but they should be worried about every game on the schedule. I mean, if Oregon State, USC proved anything, it's that you can lose on any given night. I mean, Oregon State was a 26-point underdog. For example, to give it context, OU is only a 27-point favorite this weekend at Waco. So everybody else is probably going to be less than 27 points leading up to the rest of the season, I think, off the top of my head. So maybe A&M might be close if they continue to get rolled up in College Station. But, parity in college football is the name of the day. Our man Scott Wright had a really good statistic. 3 teams from 91 to 2006, 3 number 1 teams lost to unranked opponents. It's happened 3 times in the last year and a half. A
lot of people talk about that going to K-State, that game being kind of the most similar one to the Oregon State, what happened to USC. Is that kind of one you think OU has circled to be wary of?
Possibly, but I don't know. Does Kansas State scare you?
Did Oregon State?
It'll scare me.
Does Oregon State scare anybody?
No. Yeah, if it's not on Thursday night.
And that's the point. You never know. I mean, and when you're number 1, you're going to take everybody's best shot. I mean, Baylor quarterback Robert Griffin told me, said, you know what, if you can't be number 1, Baylor obviously can't, probably never will be ever again, you want to play number 1. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the challenge for some of these teams. It's a game you can circle. I guarantee Oklahoma State circled Oklahoma. Some other teams like Kansas, Texas A&M even. I mean, that's a game that could salvage their season if they go and play well. So everybody's going to be gunning for OU now that they're number 1. As long as they are number 1, it's going to be the case.
Tell me a little bit about what to expect from Baylor this weekend. Art Briles comes in and installs a new system. They have the really good quarterback. What should the OU fans see on Saturday?
Well, I think you're going to see a team that is better than any Baylor team we've seen probably in the last decade, potentially better at least. They're exciting offensively. You talked about Robert Griffin, the quarterback. He's a 400-meter Big 12 champion as a freshman in the spring. Came like just a split second away from qualifying for Beijing to run in the hurdles. So tremendous athlete. He's going to make some plays with his feet. They have some decent receivers around him, some decent playmakers. Obviously, it's still a rebuilding process. They got to get more of the athletes, but Baylor's headed in the right direction right now. And the team that better be careful is Texas A&M. They can't let Baylor pass them in terms of recruiting and things like that. Now, you would never think that A&M could get behind Baylor in the facilities war, et cetera. But Baylor, I think, is a team that's up and coming, and I think they're going to be, maybe not this year, but in the next couple of years, a force to deal with in the Big 12.
Alrighty, thanks, Jake. We'll be back to talk OSU football after this message from Dodge. Welcome back to the Bedlam Nation Conversation. Now let's talk with Scott Wright about the OSU Cowboys, now ranked number 21 in the country. Scott, OSU gets Texas A&M this week. The Aggies stock, as Jake said, obviously is falling
like a rock.
The Pokes are rising. Is this going to be a permanent change in kind of the hierarchy of the Big 12 South, do you think?
Permanent, it's hard to say. I think that Mike Sherman's a good coach. I think that they're going to be able to recruit to Texas A&M. But it's at least Oklahoma State is in the right position now. This was sort of a goal was to get ahead of Texas A&M, and now they're there, and they certainly want to try to stay there. We'll see if Mike Gundy is able to keep bringing in talent and hold its position. But Texas A&M is going to have to do some major rebuilding at this point. Obviously, a 24-point underdog to the Cowboys in Stillwater this weekend.
Talk a little bit about, I guess, the perpetual question. The offense looks great, hanging half 100 on everybody seemingly every week. The defense looked really good at times against Troy on Saturday. Where are they now? Is the defense where it needs to be? And just talk a little bit about the offense, too.
The defense, probably the biggest thing that's missing right now is a pass rush. If they can find a way to better themselves in that area, especially from the front four. Tim Beckman had to use a lot of blitzing and get creative with how he created some pass rush last week, but they did a really good job of collapsing the pocket around the Troy quarterback and keeping him contained, not letting him get out and run on them. That's the biggest thing that they're missing right now, and some consistency. If they can kind of put a whole game together, you're going to see this defense start to make some strides in the right direction. Offensively, it's hard to say that they really have a weakness at this point. They run the ball on anybody pretty much at will, throw the ball when they need to. That run game, they can use it as much as they need to until they get a one-on-one opportunity with Des Bryant out on the edge, and then they'll go to him.
Have they held anything back yet? I mean, are there still some tricks in the bag for when they play Missouri next week?
I think so. You haven't seen a whole lot of the Zach Robinson run game. He did run the ball a little bit more against Troy last week, but there's still quite a bit that they can do with him. And you haven't seen him have to take off when things break down and be creative on his own. So I think that you'll see that start to come into play a whole lot more as we get into Big 12 play, and that alone opens up other things in the passing game or with the running backs, because that zone read play becomes more effective. You've got the option. You can pass off of that, set up the pass with that. So there are a lot of things that the quarterback run game can do this offense.
Do you think this Texas A&M team this year reminds you of OSU, Mike Gundy's first year in a lot of ways, transition to new coach, different offense, etc.?
Yeah, fairly similar. I think that maybe they had guys at Oklahoma State that were a little quicker to buy into the system, but Texas A&M I think is very similar to that year.
Alrighty, thanks, Scott. We'll be back to talk hot topics after this message from Dodge. And we're back on the Bedlam Nation conversation. This week's hot topic is obvious: upsets. Last week when we were talking on this show, we had USC in the title game, talking about who was going to play them. This week, we just got to talk about who's the next big team to go down. Georgia has already gone down. USC, like we said, has gone down. What do you guys see? Who's in the most trouble up there at the top? What do you think?
I think that Texas is the next one to go down. I know Jake's a little bit higher on Texas than I am. I've said this weekend at Colorado is a tough game for them since back in July. I'm not convinced that they have enough offense to go in there and hang with the Buffaloes. Colorado's offense isn't great, but their defense is fairly good, though it didn't look all that great against Florida State. But still, this is a tough game. Texas is having to run Colt McCoy way too much. Tells me that they don't have any confidence in their running back.
What do you think about Texas?
Scott's probably right. If it's not Colorado, it might be next weekend against OU. So it'll be one of these 2 weekends. I don't think any of the Big Ten teams really have a tough game in the next 2 weeks. I don't think Alabama does. LSU doesn't. LSU is Florida, I guess, coming up.
That's
that
OU
Red
Texas
River
weekend.
So maybe LSU would be the other team to go down. But I think it might be a while. Some games to watch in the future. Alabama goes to LSU here in about a month. That might be the game of the year in college football if both teams can stay undefeated to that point. Mm-hmm. Texas at Missouri is going to be, Missouri at Texas is going to be a great game too. And I'm looking forward to watching Oklahoma State go to Missouri. I mean, if there's a team that OSU matches up well with of the elite top 5 teams, it's Missouri, simply because OSU, they may not stop Missouri, but Missouri may not be able to stop OSU either. So you could get into one of those shootout games that OSU's had some success with over the years.
And then OU Texas is no slouch either. I mean, they're going to be at least 1-5 if everything holds to form. I was looking today. I think a couple years ago it was 2 versus 3. I think that's kind of the highest it's been. Just early preview of that, Jake. What do you think about it?
Well, that'll be the game of the year up until maybe LSU. Alabama, the only reason that would surpass it is because the Nick Saban element, which will be interesting, unless Miles might have some funny things to say about Alabama with some F-bombs, whatever. But OU Texas, it's going to be real interesting to see how Texas defends Oklahoma. I mean, I think that's going to be a big key because no one's really slowed down the Sooner offense, and I think Texas is going to have to do that to hang in that game. The other thing, too, is can Texas, I know their offensive line is supposedly better this year, but can they protect Colt McCoy? Mm-hmm. If they can't do that, they're going to be doomed from the start. So a lot of interesting storylines going into that game. Obviously, the winner has the inside track to the national championship game in a lot of ways because, Texas has Missouri at home. I like Texas in that game, and OU really doesn't have a game on its schedule where you're like, it's going to be tough,
Real quick, just to talk about the game, you'll be up in Columbia when Jake's down in Dallas. Just do you feel like OSU, has had this game on their radar for so long now? Just thinking about Missouri.
Essentially, yes. I mean, they knew that there could be some potential tough games. I think they thought Troy was maybe going to be a little bit tougher than it was. Obviously, coming into the season, nobody knew Texas A&M was going to be in this kind of situation. So I don't think they were looking too far past those two games. But yeah, they knew that if they got to 5-0, that the Missouri game is their opportunity to shine on a big stage. And like Jake said, that they can score on anybody. That game, the scoreboard operator, no bathroom breaks for him.
We'll just get through this week of Rum-Dums, and then we're going to have 2 great games next week. We'll be back to wrap up with predictions, but first a word from Dodge. Here we are with the final segment of the Bedlam Nation conversation. This time predictions. Scott, we'll start with you. OSU at home against Texas A&M. What do you think?
I don't see any way that the Cowboys have any trouble with this game. I mentioned that maybe they were looking ahead to Missouri, but Texas A&M has given them enough trouble the last few years, especially with back-to-back 1-point defeats, that they're ready to play this game and get some revenge for those two. I think Cowboys 49-14.
All right, Jake, OU at Baylor. What do you think?
Again, this pick will be inconsistent with whatever my paper. I need to bring
You just need to write it down on your hand.
It's an embarrassment. Okay.
Just pick the same one.
I'm going to go, I think I was like 52-17, something like that, Oklahoma.
Okay. All righty, that wraps it up for the Bedlam Nation conversation. For highlights, analysis, and the best stories about OU and OSU football, stick with us at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoma.